Hi everybody, this is Steve Manser, and this is part 2 of our rental agreement tutorial series, and we'll be creating a new rental agreement. Okay, before we get started with the roller session, I wanted to remind you all of how something works. We're going to see it in the roller session, and I just want to make sure everybody knows what's happening and why it happens. So as we mentioned before, Roller can be configured to automatically insert some assessments anytime you add new rentables or new pets or new vehicles into a rental agreement. Now I've set up a business to do exactly this. There will be default assessments added for every rentable, pet, and vehicle added to the rental agreement. Now I know we talked about this in a previous tutorial, but I want to reiterate it. These are just suggestions. You can remove them if you need to. You can change the amounts if you need to. And most likely you'll need to add assessments that it doesn't suggest. For example, it does not suggest security deposits. Now in this example, what we'll see is a default rent assessment for every rentable based on its rentable type. There's also a one-time pet fee. There's a pet rent. And there is a one-time vehicle registration fee. Now your business may or may not have anything like this. I just set this up for demonstration purposes so that you can see what Roller is capable of. Okay, let's get started. Now here's a list of all the rentables in this business. Let's assume that we're going to rent out rentable 005 in this example. Okay, bring up rental agreements and click the Add New button. Okay, it's not yet an active rental agreement, so it has a reference number. State is being completed. Yes, we're just starting. So if I was to exit out of the rental agreement interface at this point, this is a great opportunity to explain one of the most common problems that you'll probably run up against. I expected to see the reference number show up in the rental agreement list here, but look at the date that I've got set. I was looking at the month of February. Now when you create a new rental agreement, it sets the start dates to the current date. So I press the little circle here in the date navigator and it sets the date range to the current month. And there's our new rental agreement. So let me click on it to open it back up again. First thing to do is edit the dates. So you can see that the start dates default to the current day and the stop date is a year from now. So let's assume we want to move this person in on the 20th. And we'll have the lease terminate next year at the end of October. So we can renew it on the 1st of November next year. So we're going to start the lease, start rent, and let them take possession on the 20th. So we could go individually to each date and set them just like we did term, start, and stop. But since all the start dates are the same, we could use this button to copy the term start date to all the other start dates. Similarly, we can use this button to copy the term stop date to all the stop dates. So you could think of the CS agent as the person who's like the point person for this rental agreement. It defaults to the person that creates the rental agreement. You can change it if you need to. Remember to hit the save button. If you don't hit the save button, none of those date changes will apply. So now let's add people. First thing to do is we'll add a new person. Now note that the very first person added here is added both as a payer and as a user. Typically that's what you want. And from this point on, all of the new people added will just have the user checkbox checked. Again, you can update those to whatever they need to be. Now there's a lot of information that needs to be filled out here. Let me just put in the name. Bill M. Smith, Billy. And I can go through the tabs here. You can see there's a lot of info that needs to be filled in. One thing I do want to mention is for taxpayer ID and driver's license number, those values are encrypted on our database, so it is okay to put those numbers in. Even if hackers got to the database, they would only find encrypted versions of those values, so it's secure. Now let's assume that somebody's going to be moving in with Bill who happens to be a transactant already in our system. Now this could be that they're moving from another apartment in with Bill, or perhaps they've rented from us in the past. Now when you bring that person in, all of the information that we've saved on them previously is already loaded. It's already there, so it's a huge time saver. You may need to update it a bit, but you won't have to enter it in again from scratch. Okay, so let's save this. And now, moving on, we go to Pets. So we could get to the Pets by either hitting the next button or clicking the green circle 3. By default, the Pets button is unchecked. Let's assume that Bill has a pet, and so we'll click Add New. The first thing to do here is select a person. All pets and vehicles are associated with person. So when you click the Contact Person button here, it will list all the people currently associated with this rental agreement. Select the appropriate person. Then just fill in the rest of the information about the pet. Okay, now down here you'll notice that there's 3 fees that have already been added. As we discussed earlier, there's a pet fee and pet rent that Roller suggests. So you'll see a one-time $50 pet fee and then 2 rent entries. So the first rent fee, $3.87, is a prorated rent for the month of October from the 20th through the 31st. Then there's the normal $10 a month pet rent, which picks up on November 1st and goes through the end of October next year. Now, the only thing you need to do with these fees is go in and add in the amounts that you want due at signing. So maybe in this case, at signing, the only thing that we'll want to collect is the one-time pet fee of $50. Okay, so let's save all of that and then move on to vehicles. Now the first thing that you'll see here is that we already have a vehicle. This is because Herma, the previous transactant that we added to this rental agreement, already had a car. So we had all the information about her car and we moved it in automatically when she was added to the rental agreement. Similarly, if she had pets, they would have been merged into this rental agreement also. Now one more thing to note, remember I mentioned earlier that there's a one-time registration fee for vehicles, and when we added this vehicle, that registration fee got assessed again. Now this is one of those times where you may need to make some adjustments. Herma may be a current resident, in which case she's already paid the fee and we don't want to charge her again simply because she's moving to a different apartment. So I'm going to click on this fee and delete it. Okay, now let's add Bill's car. Click the Add New button. Associate this car with Bill, and then just enter in the information. I'm going to fill this information out quickly and we'll resume right after I get it filled in. Now Bill's vehicle is a new vehicle in the system here, so we will want to charge that vehicle registration fee and we'll want to collect that at signing. So let's save that. Okay, now let's add the rentable. We'll use the next button this time. And I think we said we wanted 005. Yep. So let's edit that and check out the fees. So as we mentioned earlier, there's a gas base fee which occurs monthly, and there's also a rent payment. So Roller suggests prorated assessments for October and recurring assessments starting in November. So for this one, let's assume that we'll collect the $50 at signing. Now the bill here is actually only $19.35, and any extra will be held over and just applied towards future assessments. Okay, so now let's go to the prorated payment that's due on the 20th. Let's add $1,500 due at signing, and like I mentioned before, any overpayment will be held and used for future assessments. Now let's add the security deposit. Add a new assessment here. I can just start typing security. There we go. Security deposit assessment. And we'll say that that's 3,000. And that is a non-recurring thing. We only charge that once. And we'll make sure that we get that at signing. Okay, I think that does it. So now I think we're ready to move on. Let's go to parent-child. There are no extra rentables, such as furniture or whatever, to be tied to another rentable. So nothing to do here. Let's move on to tie. And again, nothing to do here because there's only one rentable and both transactants are tied to that one rentable automatically. So at this point, we just go to the Finish tab and just take a look at all of our charges and make sure that we've got everything that we need for signing. And then we would go to Get Approvals. Now, before we do any state changes here, the first thing it's going to do is look to validate all the data that we've entered. And we can, the little red dot here on payers and users indicates that there's some problems with the data. So we can go in here and take a look at it. And it's telling us that it found 15 errors and it's highlighting bill in red, indicating that there's a problem in bill. So if we open it up, so each tab with a dot on it means that there's some issues in that tab, and the fields themselves within each tab are marked red, showing where it's either missing information or the information is wrong. And so we need to go in and fix this. In this case, I just need to fill out a whole bunch of information. So I'm going to do that quickly, and then we'll pick up again once all of that information is entered. Okay, let's press save here and see how we did. Yep, looks like that's okay. So now let's try Get Approvals again. Good. So at this point, what happens is you would check and validate all the data that everybody's given you. Validate their history, maybe contact, their references, all of that sort of checking. And when all of that is done to your satisfaction, the leasing agent or whoever can make the first approval. Now, if they don't approve, then it'll ask you for a reason why, and you can select from these reasons here. These reasons are configured on a per company basis. You can add or remove any ones that you want. Now, when I hit update here to actually decline it, the approval flow for this rental agreement will stop. You'll see that the application was declined, and in this case, it indicates the reason, and you can look down at the bottom and see the history of what happened. Now, let's suppose that after talking with the applicant, we found that it was a mistake and they actually do have credit and it was good credit. We can put it back in the pending first approval state and go through this process again. So leasing agents can move the state to whatever is appropriate to do. Now, remember that the history of all of this is kept and you can see it down below, so whoever did it should be able to explain why they did what they did. So again, let's just assume this was an honest mistake and we want to start things over again. So in this case, we'll approve. Now when this is done, you can look down below and see that it marks who made this approval and when. And you'll also notice that the rental agreement itself moved into the pending second approval status. So now we would have a second approver come along and approve or decline if they find something wrong. In this case, we'll just approve it and keep things moving. Click the update button, and then you can look down below and see that the second approver is the person and the time is marked. Now we're ready to have the people move in. So we're going to set the document date when we'll actually execute the documents. We said we'll do that on the 20th. And then you would have the renters come in, sign the documents, give them the keys to the place, do the initial walkthrough. And when all of that is complete, we would go down to the action area here and indicate that we've completed the move-in. And once we execute that, it now becomes an active rental agreement. You can see that the state has moved to active. There's no longer a reference number. In this case, it's changed to Rental Agreement 5, RA5, and you can see that it's in the active state. The other thing to notice is that since this rental agreement became active, this rental agreement form is now in the read-only mode. You would actually have to hit the edit button if you wanted to make any changes to it. Now when we go back and look at the rental agreements grid, we can see the new rental agreement in there. There are 2 payers in this case, so the payers column has both payers listed. One more thing to look at here is if we go to the assessments list, we should see the assessments for this rental agreement being created, and here they all are. You can just look at all of the assessments associated with Rentable 005. Okay, so there you have it. We have just created a rental agreement from scratch, and we've put it into effect. In the next few tutorials, we'll be looking at doing some other things with this rental agreement, extending it, making changes to it, and a few other things. So as always, leave me your suggestions, comments, and questions in the area below, and I will do my best to respond to everybody.